What if the smallest action, the kind that would normally go unnoticed, sparked a chain of events so powerful it tore apart everything you thought you knew about justice? For Ethan Cole, a simple step onto an empty street would do just that. In one moment, he went from an ordinary man to the catalyst of a storm that would shake an entire city. And when the dust settled, nothing in this town would ever be the same. It was a sweltering summer afternoon, the kind where even the air felt heavy, suffocating. Ethan Cole, 36, a man of quiet strength, stepped off the curb. Dressed simply in a button-up shirt and slacks, he exuded a calm confidence that most people overlooked. To those passing by, he was just another person enduring the oppressive heat. The crosswalk was 2 blocks away, but the road ahead was empty, not a single car in sight. Just a quick dash, Ethan thought, and in a few long strides he crossed the street. But as his foot hit the sidewalk, the piercing wail of a police siren shattered the silence. A patrol car screeched to a halt behind him, its lights flashing violently. Heads turned, drawing attention to the commotion. 2 officers stepped out of the cruiser. Sergeant Walker, a burly man with a linebacker's build, led the way. His face, permanently scowling, radiated authority. His younger partner, Officer Hayes, trailed behind, looking uneasy and fidgeting with his belt. "Hey, you!" Walker barked, slapping his baton against his palm. His voice carried an edge of anger. "What do you think you're doing?" Ethan blinked in confusion but remained calm. "Crossing the street," he replied, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Sorry if that's an issue. There weren't any cars." Walker's eyes narrowed. "An issue? You just jaywalked. That's breaking the law. Now, hand over your ID." Ethan's hand moved slowly to his pocket, cautious to avoid sudden movements. He handed over his ID. Walker snatched it, glancing at it briefly before his eyes met Ethan's with contempt. "Figures?" Walker muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think the rules don't apply to you?" He sneered. "Not on my watch." Ethan remained composed. "Sir, it's just a minor infraction. Isn't this a bit extreme?" Walker's voice grew louder. "Extreme? You want to lecture me now? Here's a lesson for you. Hands behind your back. You're under arrest." Ethan froze. "Excuse me? For crossing the street?" "Jaywalking," Walker snarled, pulling out his cuffs. "You've been warned." Ethan was stunned. Arrested for jaywalking? The absurdity of it took a moment to sink in, but he didn't resist. The cold metal of the cuffs clicked around his wrists, and Walker shoved him toward the cruiser, making him stumble. As Ethan glanced at the growing crowd of onlookers, his disbelief turned to something sharper. This wasn't just about an arrest anymore. People had already started recording. A woman muttered, "Seriously? For jaywalking?" Another man, shaking his head, said, "This is going viral." In the back lot of the precinct, the setting was grim. The cracked asphalt seemed to stretch forever, littered with abandoned patrol cars. In the far corner, an old cage stood, its rusted bars looking like something out of a bygone era. It was supposed to be an overflow holding area, but it looked more like a relic of a crueler time. Walker yanked Ethan from the car, gripping his arm as they walked toward the cage. "Step inside," he commanded, unlocking the door with a dramatic flourish. Ethan hesitated, his gaze falling on the cage. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice steady but filled with disbelief. Walker smirked. "Dead serious. You break the rules, you face the consequences. Now get in." "For jaywalking?" Ethan asked, incredulous. Walker sneered. "You'll have plenty of time to think about it in there." Ethan sighed and stepped into the cage. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing in the empty lot. He surveyed the scene: rusted metal, cracked concrete, and the faint smell of oil and decay. He sat down, leaning against the bars, trying to remain calm. "Well, this is cozy," Ethan muttered, glancing at the cage's dilapidated state. Is the abandoned junkyard aesthetic intentional, or are you planning to redecorate soon? Walker's laugh was more of a scoff than amusement. Let's see how long you're cracking jokes after a few hours in here. He turned to leave, his partner trailing behind him. Ethan called after them, "Don't forget the room service. I'll take anything that doesn't come with tetanus." The scene outside continued to unfold. Onlookers gathered, murmurs of disbelief spreading. The video of Ethan's arrest went viral, and soon advocacy groups and media outlets had picked up the story. It wasn't just an arrest, it had become a symbol of systemic injustice. Back at the precinct, chaos had erupted. Phones rang incessantly, reporters camped outside, and the police chief sat at his desk, grimacing at the growing pile of media reports and angry emails. "Get Walker and Hayes in here, now," the chief ordered into the intercom. Minutes later, the officers entered. Walker still had the same smug look on his face, while Hayes appeared nervous, visibly drained by the events of the day. The chief slammed a pile of papers on the desk. "What the hell were you thinking?" he demanded. "Do you have any idea what kind of storm you've caused?" Walker rolled his eyes. "It's just noise, Chief. People get riled up, but they'll move on." The chief's face turned crimson. "Move on? The mayor just called. City council reps are outside. This isn't going away." Before Walker could respond, the door knocked. An officer nervously entered. Chief, someone's here to see you. He's with the federal oversight team." The room fell silent. Walker's smirk disappeared, and Hayes's face drained of color. Moments later, the door opened, and Ethan Cole walked in. But this time, he was no longer the man they had arrested. He was dressed in a sharp suit, exuding an air of authority. His presence was commanding. "Good morning," Ethan said, placing a folder on the chief's desk. The thud of it landing was as sharp as a gunshot. Walker's eyes widened. "You—" Ethan raised a hand, silencing him. "Yes, Sergeant Walker, it's me, the man you threw into a cage yesterday. But today, I'm here in my capacity as a federal investigator for human rights compliance." The chief sank into his chair, rubbing his temples in disbelief. Hayes seemed frozen in place. Ethan opened the folder, revealing a detailed report. "I've reviewed your department's records," Ethan said coolly. "Yesterday wasn't your first violation, or your second, or your 10th. Walker muttered under his breath. Ethan snapped the folder shut. "Effective immediately, your department is under federal review. Sergeant Walker, you're suspended. Officer Hayes, you might want to get a lawyer." Ethan turned toward the door, pausing before he left. "Chief, consider this a wake-up call. This city deserves better." By the end of the day, Walker and Hayes had been removed from duty. The incident sparked citywide reforms. The rusted cage in the precinct lot was dismantled for good, a symbol of the broken system that had held it in place for too long. Ethan returned to his office that evening, his resolve stronger than ever. This wasn't just about one arrest. It was about dismantling a system that had allowed such abuses to happen unchecked, one step at a time. As he leaned back in his chair, a small, satisfied smile tugged at the corner of his lips. This battle wasn't over. It was only just beginning.